Hey, what's going on, everyone? Welcome back to the channel. It's that time of year again. It's the All-Star break, and we took last weekend off of the power rankings, so I wanted to jump in there, do a special video. It's All-Star break during the week, no baseball to watch, so I wanted to go over all the teams in the MLB and give them a letter grade, kind of go back to school, rank all the teams, show how I feel they have been doing so far this season. We're going to go through all 30 teams. A, of course, best grade of class. You're doing the best. You're doing much better than expected, maybe, or you're just having a killer season. F, you're flunking. Coming into the season, expectations might have been high. You're disaster. And all the teams in between, we're going to go through it alphabetically. But guys, before we do that, please, if you're new, or if you watch all these videos and you haven't done it yet, subscribe to the channel. We're on our way to 1,000, and I'm really hoping to do that by the end of the season. And we're going to keep making videos. So we're going to start things off with the A's. Not the letter, the alphabet. Arizona Diamondbacks. They've had a good season so far. And unlike some people, maybe, I have not expected them to be as good as they have been. They might have gotten away with a little bit of an easier schedule early in the season, but they've managed to keep around 600, managed to keep in the division title race with the Dodgers. So I'm giving them an A. They've had a great season. I didn't expect them to be as high as they are right now. Maybe I expected them to make a couple steps forward compared to last year, but right now I'm giving them an A. They've had a great start to the season. Next up, we have the Atlanta Braves, and can't really give the Atlanta Braves any other grade except an A, right? They're just dominating all the competition. We saw at the All-Star game, they had all their players there basically, and they have that team signed up for a long time. Maybe a little bit of a slow start, but they're right where you want them to be if you're a playoff contending team, World Series contending team. They're killing it. This did not happen on purpose, but next up, Baltimore. Gotta get Baltimore right now. I'd give them an A as well. Like, I'm pretty hyped with how Baltimore's done so far this season. They've been top 5 in the power rankings every week for quite some time now, and they've managed to show themselves as a true contender in the American League, especially the East. They're right on the heels of Tampa Bay, and I wouldn't be surprised to see them take this division at this point. If you're a Baltimore fan, you got to be ecstatic with how the season's gone so far, giving them top marks in the league. Next up, we have Boston. Boston's had a pretty average season, right around 500, last in the American League. So I'm going to give them a pretty average grade. I'm going to give them a C right now. Probably a little bit better than I expected, but still not great. And I don't expect them to make the playoffs. I think if we're going to see them come a B or an A, they got to start winning. They got to move up in this division. They got to be in the playoff race. Otherwise, they're just kind of average, mediocre, and that's what a C is. Chicago White Sox. I don't think there's anything else to say. The White Sox have had a disastrous season in a disastrous division. They're failing. This is not what we wanted to see the White Sox. We did not want them here. They're out of the playoff race. Maybe, I guess no team's really out of the playoff race in this division, but they're right there at the bottom of that. Next up, Chicago Cubs. This one was a little interesting to decide. I'm kind of going with the flow here, and as the teams come up, I'm going to kind of grade the teams. I'm going to give the Cubs a D, and a lot of that weighs in because I thought this team should be doing better based on their roster. Based on their division, I thought they should be doing better. They're just not where I would expect them to be in this kind of setup. I feel like they were in a position to do better, and they're just not delivering. And right now, they're on the borderline of being a failure, of course. Still think they can go on a little bit of a heater compared to the rest, compared to fails. Not a complete failure for the Cubs here. They maybe are taking some steps forward, but expect them to be sellers at the trade deadline and pretty much makes them a C. Next up, we have the Cincinnati Reds, and based on this past month and a half, it's hard to argue that they don't get anything other than an A. They've been on fire. Their prospects and young guys are all starting to step up and be monster. They're leading the division. This team is pretty much on a collision course to win the division. Coming into this season, I had no expectations of them even being in the top half of the power rankings, and now we see them in the top 10. So, of course, we're going to see them in the A position. Next up, we have the Cleveland Guardians, and this one's interesting to me. I'm going to give them a B. I did not expect them to win this division. Didn't really consider them to be more than bottom half of the league, but they've proven to be pretty consistent. I think they have the only team in the entire league that hasn't lost more than 3 in a row all season long. So they have the lowest amount of losing streak length. So that's pretty big bonus. Their pitching's always been solid, and Jose Ramirez has been a monster for this guy. I'd be pretty excited. This Guardians team has been a pleasant surprise for me. Not quite in the A tier, but not quite in the C tier. So I'm going to give them that B. Colorado Rockies, pretty simple. Another bottom tier team. Just a failure of a season for this team. Not making any progress. They've made some big signings with Chris Bryant and all that over the past number of years. None of it's paying off. Rockies are destined to be last in this division. Could be a while before we see the Rockies even come out of that division not being in last. So that's a colossal failure in my opinion. Next up, the Detroit Tigers. Now this is an interesting one. I'm going to go right now and give them a C, maybe right average where you would expect them to be coming into the season. They're competing. Some nights they look absolutely terrible. Other nights they look like they could maybe make a push for the division, but they got a long way to go. And this team, not quite in the bottom half. I think right there, like I've been talking, C average, where we expected them to be. Not too much of a surprise after that. Next up, Houston Astros, reigning World Series champions. I'm going to give them a C as well, because this is not what we wanted to see for the Astros. I know they've been dealing with a lot of injuries, had a tougher division. A lot of their division rivals have stepped up and been a lot stronger. They're in the playoff hunt. They're in a good, secure position, I guess you could say, but a very vulnerable team, and they're not performing up to expectations of a team. Of course, it's not a failure of a season. They're still on the road to the playoffs. They're not a disaster at D, in my opinion, so I think C is justified. Next up, just adding to the failures of the season, Kansas City Royals. I don't think there's too much to say about them. They've been last in the power rankings a couple of times this season, battling with the Oakland A's. Last place in probably the worst division in baseball, and a team that has been so bad for so long, they're not even going to be guaranteed some good picks come draft time. So Kansas City has a long road ahead of them, and this season has already been pretty much a big, colossal failure. Next up, we got the Angels, and if it wasn't for Ohtani, they'd probably be at C, but I'm going to give them a B, because I think coming into this season, I just expected them to be middle of the pack, and sure, they are a little bit middle of the pack right now, outside of the playoffs looking in, but I think they have the pieces, and if they have a successful trade deadline, I think that could higher their grade, but they're kind of a little bit above average, a little bit better than I expected. Ohtani continues to be a monster, so I like to give them a B. Arguably, maybe could be a C. Next up, we have the next LA team, the Dodgers. I'm going to give them a B as well. Not been a great season for them, but at the same time, early in the division, they're right around 600. They haven't played great baseball. The pitching has been inconsistent, and they still managed to be top of this division. Got to be somewhat excited. They're going to be in the playoffs, no question about that. As a Dodgers fan, you wouldn't really expect them to be anywhere else, right? But disaster is kind of averted. They're on their way, and I think B is more than fair. Next up, we got Miami Marlins. And if you've watched my power rankings all season long, I have not given them enough credit all season long. So this is me trying to make up for it. They definitely deserve an A. This Marlins team has outperformed all expectations, I think, from most analysts, including myself. I'm not an analyst, but definitely outperformed my expectations. Got to give them an A. They've had a great season so far, and they continue to compete, and they continue to surprise me. So it's about time I give them a little bit of a shout. Next up, we got the Milwaukee Brewers, and for me, it's not been a great season for the Brewers. It's been a D for disappointment. It's been complete disappointment. Maybe it's a little bit of a trend in this division that I haven't seen what I kind of expected in this division, I guess. A lot of this division, complete surprise for me, and we'll see it in a little bit of the rankings. In my opinion, Milwaukee, 2 months in, should have been starting to walk away with this division, and they just went on a massive losing streak, couldn't win games. And they got to be disappointed because right now they're fighting for a playoff spot, and I didn't think that they should be at this rate. At least I thought they were going to be fighting with the Cardinals, but we know how that's going. Next up, Minnesota Twins, this is exactly the same story. I'm giving them a D. They're completely disappointing. As well, they're in a situation where, sure, they're going to make the playoffs, but they are performing under expectations, in my opinion. This Central Division American League should have been a walk away for them, and I'm completely shocked that they didn't take the opportunity when it was given to them. First 2 months of the season, this division was disaster. All the other teams were completely terrible, and Minnesota just never got on the win streak that you would expect. They should have had a 10-11 game lead at one point. They just never got there. Therefore, in my opinion, very disastrous season. Next up, we got the Yankees. They're a little bit lower than where I would have thought they would be, but I'm going to be giving them a C, just for a complete average season so far for the Yankees. They're not out of it. They've been playing enough to win games. They're in the middle of the American League East, a tough division. Kind of one of those seasons where the Yankees are going under the radar, under most people's power rankings. Again, C's are kind of under the radar in this situation. So don't be surprised. The Yankees can only go up from here. I don't really expect their season to turn out disastrous or failure, but they're borderline at that point to get there. Next up, New York Mets. Now, this team is borderline failure. Not quite there, in my opinion, because they are in the playoff race. In theory, I think they're about 6 games under 500. But it's been a disaster so far. Pitching completely inconsistent. Offense not getting things going at all for them. So got to give them a D. Just not where we expected the Mets to be. We expected them to be leading this division, if not competing for a 650 kind of win percentage. And that is a far way off for this Mets team right now. Next up, Oakland A's. We all know where they're going. They're going bottom row. Failure. No questions asked. This team's at home. The fans have been a failure for them. Them moving the team, that whole situation's been a failure. The team is at one point on pace to be the worst record in MLB history. However, I don't think they're going to get there quite anymore. But we're going to see a couple other young prospects calling up, I guess, tomorrow, and we'll see how that performs. But they start to turn their season around. Maybe they can get out of the failure if we start to see some bright future for this team. But right now, none of these teams have a bright future at all. Next up, we got the Philadelphia Phillies. I think we're going to have to give them a C. Not quite where we would want to be as the ex-National League champions, right? The roster seems to be there. The talent's definitely there. We see highlights of it. We see glimpses of it, but it's just not all completely together yet. I think it's kind of similar to what the Yankees are at. We could see them, I think they're a little bit better than the Yankees, but I could see them making a case to be up in the B category if they start getting things together. Of course, if they go on a tear, we'll see them in the A. I like what I see. Next up, Pittsburgh Pirates. Now, this one was a little bit difficult, but I settled on putting them in the D category, and I know they've made a large step compared to years in the past. However, they were on fire early in the season. If we were looking at them in the first 2 months, they'd be up in the A-B area, but it's been a disastrous followed months. They just don't seem to have it, and I think they might be possibly losing their momentum and their window. And I know that's crazy to say because their window ended up being like 2 months long. But Pirates, just not a great season. It's turning out to be quite a disastrous season. I expected them to be better and do better, and they're just not doing that. Next up, San Diego. Same kind of situation. I find them very similar to the New York Mets in that it's not been a great season. And they're sitting in 4th in that tough National League West division, and they got a lot of work to do. And at this point, I think it's a disaster. The signings aren't working out. The rotation, we see glimpses of solidness, but then at other times it's just not getting anything done. So they got to be a D. Next up, San Francisco Giants. This one could be close to an A, but I'm going to land on a B for the San Francisco Giants. They've had a pretty good year. Completely unexpected by me. They went on that, 11 or 10 game win streak that they went on a tear there, smashing the Dodgers, smashing some of the division rivals that they had on that process. But there's been times where they've been inconsistent and it's managed to put them in 3rd place in the division. I think coming into the season, if you're at the All-Star break, you're sitting where the Giants are, you're happy. And so you got to be happy with a grade of a B. But in order to move on up, we need to see that consistency solid. Next up, Seattle. This one, you could argue that it's a disaster, a D, but for me, they've got a C. Like, they're kind of right where you expect them to be. It's a tough division. They didn't really make too many additions in the offseason to make their team better, whereas the rest of their division continues to get a little bit better. It's tough division to compete in. It's no surprise where they are. They're kind of sitting at average after hosting the All-Star game and all that stuff. We'll see if they can turn it around. They got a lot of room here, and this playoff race is gonna be exciting. Next up, St. Louis Cardinals, and without a doubt, failure. From the get-go, when they played the Jays, first series of the season, I had them in the top row of the power rankings. I thought this team was going to be who they've been for decades. Then the wheels just came off, and they just kept falling. They kept losing, and their records, last place in their division. Sure, they can go on a huge win streak here. They could win the division, like, this is a big could, but as any Cardinals fan or whatever, this whole season's looking like a write-off. Next up, we got Tampa Bay Rays. Arguably, they've had such a good season. I think they still hold the best percentage in the MLB, but I'm going to give them a B because that start to the season, it was a little inflated because their schedule was one of the easiest in the MLB at the time, give them such a big record. And over the past 2 months, they've played basically 500 baseball, which is kind of where we start to see them regress, and maybe they're a little human. Whether they can hold on to this division, if they can, I think that would bunch them into an A. But right now, I'm having trouble seeing them play that awesome baseball that would put them in that category. Next up, we got the Texas Rangers. Very similar situation. I'm going to give them an A because they are playing solid. I'm a little concerned whether or not they're going to be able to keep it up. Pitching has me a little bit concerned, but the depth is pretty awesome. With DeGrom going down, concerns have risen, and they continue to win. The Rangers, sure, they might not be playing as good as they once were earlier in the season, but they're still playing best baseball, I think, in that division, as well as I think they're doing a little bit better than I would have expected. Did I expect them to have the best offense possibly in that entire MLB? Maybe Atlanta. But you know what I'm saying. I do want to give a lot of credit to Texas. They've had a great year so far. It's the All-Star break. They got to keep it going. Next up, we got the Toronto Blue Jays. And this one is, for me, maybe a little bit biased, but it's been a disaster of a season right now for the Blue Jays. It's sure they have a pretty decent record. They went on a nice 5-game winning streak right before the All-Star break. But the inconsistency of the offense, the bullpen being atrocious, the rotation and Manoah and all those issues, they are far worse than they should be, in my opinion. This team should have been right there in the thick of things in the 600s. So I think as a fan, maybe I'm being a little harsh. Maybe you could argue they should be in the C category. Probably not in the same category as this. They probably have a better chance making the playoffs than all these other teams. So we'll give them a D+, let's say that. But the Jays have a lot of work. It's going to be a big, serious down the stretch here. But honestly, it's probably for the best for them. If they're playing serious baseball the rest of the way going into the playoffs, that's going to be good for them, I think, going into the playoffs. They have a good team. They have a good three-game series kind of roster. So keep your eyes on the Jays. I think this is the team to watch. And that leads us to the last team, the W's, the Washington Nationals. And I'm going to give them... I'm going to give them a C. I was going to give them a D, but I think the Nationals are right there where they should be and right there what you kind of are expecting from the Nationals coming in this season. Never once expected them to be a playoff threat. Never really expected them any other spot other than last place in this division. But some of these young guys on their team are starting to shine. And I think the rebuild might be in a better position than, of course, all these bottom teams. And guys, there you have it. School's out. There's the rankings. There's the letter grade for each team so far this season. Little over halfway through. Let me know what you guys think. What team was I way off the mark on? And what team do you agree with? Let me know in the comments below. Smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and we will see you on Sunday for the next Power Rankings. Thanks for watching.